The Storm-Kissed Plateau stretched endlessly beneath the swirling sky, its vast, lightning-charged expanse a testament to untamed magic. Jagged rocks and ancient metal structures dotted the land, remnants of an age when alchemists had harnessed both the arcane and the mechanical. Darius, the Lightning Warlock, stood at the edge of the plateau, his eyes reflecting the flickering lights above. His cloak rustled in the charged wind, and his iron gauntlet thrummed with the energy he had come to master. It had been years since he first came to this place, a site of both his shame and his ambition, and today he sought redemption. Keldan, a master of mechanical constructs, approached, his footsteps crunching softly against the gravel, the gears of his intricate armor whirring with every move. He gave Darius a solemn nod, his face hardened by countless trials. "The storm grows stronger, Darius," he said, glancing at the horizon where dark clouds gathered. Sparks danced between the metallic towers, charging the air with anticipation. "If we're to succeed, we need to reach the heart of the plateau before the tempest peaks." Darius acknowledged the urgency in his friend's voice, but his heart was heavy, weighed down by the knowledge of what lay ahead. His sin, the very reason the storm existed. The pair set off across the plateau, Keldan's gear-driven exosuit humming rhythmically as Darius summoned a sphere of protective energy around them. Lightning crackled in the distance, and strange glowing figures appeared and vanished in the periphery of their vision, phantoms of the past, fragments of forgotten dreams. The wind howled with a voice that seemed to speak directly to Darius, calling him deeper into the storm. He clenched his gauntlet, feeling the energy surge through his arm, and reminded himself of his purpose: to quell the storm and rid himself of the past mistakes that haunted him. As they navigated the twisted landscape, they passed relics from a forgotten age, broken automaton bodies half buried in the ground, their iron limbs entwined with the roots of the plateau's hardy flora. Each relic told a story of triumphs and mistakes, of a world that once danced with both magic and machinery before it all fell to ruin. Keldan paused before one such automaton, its lifeless eye socket still glimmering faintly with residual energy. "You think it remembers?" he asked, his voice thick with wonder. Darius remained silent, knowing all too well that some memories were best left undisturbed. The wind intensified, and Darius felt the lightning within the storm responding to his presence, as if recognizing him. A sudden bolt struck one of the ancient spires nearby, sending shards of metal into the air. He shielded Keldan, their magical barrier shimmering under the impact. They both knew the deeper they went, the closer they came to the truth, of the storm's origins and of Darius's forgotten transgression. Keldan turned to Darius, a knowing look in his eyes. "No turning back now," he said. Darius nodded, a mixture of determination and fear etched on his face. The storm called, and he would answer. The deeper they ventured into the heart of the storm-kissed plateau, the more erratic the lightning became. Darius and Keldan navigated through rocky outcrops and ancient metallic structures that sparked with residual energy. The air was thick with anticipation, and the storm above seemed to respond to Darius's presence, arcs of electricity striking nearer with each step they took. Darius's heart pounded as if in rhythm with the storm, each strike a reminder of his forgotten past, the sin that had cursed this land. Keldan adjusted his exosuit, the gears and pistons clinking, his eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of the storm's core. Suddenly the ground beneath them began to vibrate, a deep, resonant hum that echoed through the metal and rock. Keldan frowned, his gaze shifting to the twisted wreckage of an ancient automaton half buried nearby. The humming grew louder, and the automaton's eyes began to glow a faint blue, pulsing in time with the vibrations. Darius felt the familiar tug of magic, an echo of the incantations he had once cast in his hubris. "They are waking up," Keldan muttered, stepping back as the automaton's limbs began to twitch. Darius reached out, his gauntlet glowing as he attempted to contain the energy. It was a reminder of his sin. These constructs, once guardians, had been twisted into restless relics by his reckless magic. As they moved forward, they encountered more of these reanimated relics, their glowing eyes following Darius as if recognizing their creator. Keldan's exosuit hissed as he prepared to defend them, but Darius raised a hand, stopping him. "No, they're not hostile. They're trying to guide us," he said, his voice filled with an unexpected sense of sorrow. The automatons turned, their limbs creaking as they began to move deeper into the plateau, leading the way. Darius followed, his eyes narrowing as he wondered what awaited them at the end of this path, what truth the storm was trying to show him. The storm crackled overhead, almost as if in approval, as they trudged on. The further they went, the more surreal the landscape became. Metallic vines twisted out of the ground, crackling with blue energy, and strange flowers of copper and steel bloomed, their petals reflecting the lightning above. The automatons led them to a clearing where an enormous iron spire rose from the ground, covered in runes that Darius vaguely recognized. "This is it," Keldan whispered, his voice a mix of awe and fear. The spire was a beacon, the source of the storm's power, a remnant of Darius's past experiments. Darius stepped forward, his gauntlet glowing brighter, the air around him buzzing with magic. He knew that confronting the spire meant facing the truth of what he had done. As Darius placed his hand on the spire, a vision surged through his mind, a memory of the day he had tried to bind the storm, to use its energy to forge an invincible army of automatons. He had wanted to protect, to create something powerful enough to deter any threat. But the storm had resisted, and his magic had twisted, turning his creations into restless beings and binding the storm to this land. He pulled his hand away, gasping as the realization hit him. The lightning crackled above as if mocking him, and Keldan placed a hand on his shoulder. "We can still fix this, Darius. But we need to act now," he urged. Darius nodded, determination settling in his eyes. He would face the storm and end the chaos he had caused, no matter the cost. The storm raged above, with a ferocity that seemed almost sentient, as if the sky itself had awakened to challenge Darius's resolve. Darius stood before the iron spire, his gauntlet glowing with an intensity that mirrored the lightning crackling overhead. Keldan took a defensive stance beside him, his eyes scanning the edges of the clearing where the shadows of awakened automatons lurked, watching their every move. The storm surged, bolts of electricity arcing from the clouds, striking the ground around them. The plateau seemed to groan in response, as if the land itself was reacting to Darius's presence. The air was thick with power, and the warlock knew that this was the moment of truth, whether he could control the energy or be consumed by it. Darius focused his energy, his gauntlet humming as he channeled the lightning, directing it into the spire. The runes glowed brighter, pulsating in sync with his heartbeats. Memories flooded back, his reckless ambition, the spells he had cast in his youth, and the desire to wield a power that no one else could comprehend. Keldan watched in awe as Darius battled the storm, his figure illuminated by the blinding flashes of light. The automaton guardians, remnants of his past mistakes, moved closer, their mechanical limbs clanking as they formed a circle around the clearing. It was as if they too were part of this ritual, silent witnesses to the warlock's reckoning. A sudden explosion of energy erupted from the spire, throwing Darius back. He crashed to the ground, his vision blurred, the sky a chaotic swirl of blue and white. Keldan rushed to his side, helping him up as the automaton guardians began to move, their glowing eyes fixed on the warlock. "They're not stopping, Darius," Keldan shouted over the roaring storm. Darius gritted his teeth, pushing himself to stand. The storm wasn't just responding to him, it was calling to him. He could feel the energy in his veins, as if the lightning itself had become a part of him. He knew then that his attempt to control the storm had failed, and the only way forward was to surrender to it. Darius raised his gauntlet, allowing the lightning to strike him. The energy coursed through his body, and for a moment he felt as if he had become one with the storm. His senses expanded, the plateau and the storm around him becoming part of his awareness. He could feel the anguish of the automatons, their twisted forms yearning for release, and the raw power of the storm that had been bound to this place for so long. It was then that he realized the truth. The storm wasn't his enemy. It was his salvation. He had to become one with it, to let go of his past sins, and allow himself to be transformed by the very power he had once sought to control. With a final shout, Darius let the lightning envelop him fully, his body glowing with energy as the storm connected with him. Keldan watched, his eyes wide with both fear and hope, as Darius's figure began to dissolve into the storm. The automatons around them halted, their eyes dimming, their limbs relaxing as if they too had found peace. The iron spire hummed one last time before the runes faded into darkness, and the clearing fell silent. Darius was gone, his form replaced by a swirling vortex of lightning that rose into the sky, merging with the storm. Keldan dropped to his knees, a mixture of sorrow and awe washing over him. The storm had called, and Darius had answered, his legacy forever bound to the lightning that danced across the storm-kissed plateau. The storm, once chaotic and relentless, began to calm as Darius's essence merged with its energy. The swirling sky slowly shifted from a blinding mix of blue and white to softer hues of grey and silver, as if the rage had been pacified. Keldan remained on his knees, watching as the vortex of lightning faded into the clouds, leaving only faint arcs of electricity dancing across the plateau. He felt an emptiness settle within him, a strange blend of loss and hope. His friend was gone, yet the plateau, once cursed with unending storms, now lay in a state of fragile peace. The automatons, who had once been restless guardians, had ceased their movements, their glowing eyes extinguished. Keldan rose slowly, his joints aching from the strain of the confrontation. He approached the now dark iron spire, the runes etched into its surface nothing more than dull carvings in the metal. He placed a hand on the spire, feeling the cold surface under his fingers, and closed his eyes. He could still feel Darius's presence, an echo within the storm, a whisper that reassured him that the warlock's sacrifice had not been in vain. The sky rumbled gently, a soft roll of thunder that seemed almost like a farewell. Keldan took a deep breath, a sense of closure washing over him. The storm had taken his friend, but it had also released the plateau from its centuries-old torment. As Keldan turned away from the spire, the automatons that had once encircled the clearing began to collapse, their limbs giving way as they crumbled to the ground. It was as if the magic that had kept them animated had finally been released. Keldan watched, a mix of sorrow and relief in his eyes. He knew that these constructs, once meant to protect, had become twisted by Darius's original ambition. Now, in the aftermath of his friend's transformation, they were finally able to rest. The metallic vines that had twisted around the spire began to wither, their blue glow fading as they disintegrated into dust. The plateau was returning to its natural state, free of the magical binds that had twisted it for so long. Keldan began the long walk back across the plateau, his exosuit hissing softly with each step. The air was different now, lighter, almost serene. The once overbearing storm clouds were breaking apart, revealing patches of blue sky. He looked up, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, a single ray of sunlight pierced through the clouds, casting a warm glow on the rocky landscape. Keldan smiled faintly, knowing that Darius's sacrifice had brought hope not only to the plateau, but perhaps to himself as well. He had seen his friend face the consequences of his past, and ultimately rise above them, even if it meant losing himself in the process. As Keldan reached the edge of the plateau, he paused and looked back one final time. The vast expanse of the Storm-Kissed Plateau stretched out before him, a place that had once been filled with anguish and unrelenting power, now quiet and at peace. He could still feel the presence of the storm, a lingering energy that seemed to watch over the land, no longer hostile but protective. He nodded to the horizon, a silent acknowledgement of Darius's legacy, before turning away. With a determined stride, Keldan began his journey back to the world beyond the plateau, ready to share the story of the Lightning Warlock who had given everything to set things right. Keldan's journey back from the plateau was filled with a sense of introspection and newfound clarity. The storm, once a malevolent force that had dominated the land, now loomed gently on the horizon, almost like a guardian watching over the landscape. The path that had once been treacherous and filled with unpredictable lightning strikes was now calm, bathed in the soft light of the setting sun. Keldan could still feel Darius's presence in the air, in the soft rumble of thunder that echoed faintly above. It was as if his friend was now part of something greater, a force that extended beyond the boundaries of the physical world. As he descended the rocky path from the plateau, Keldan encountered a group of travelers, pilgrims who had heard tales of the storm's magic and had come to witness it for themselves. They looked to him for answers, their eyes wide with curiosity and wonder. Keldan paused, glancing back at the plateau where the dark spire now stood as a monument to Darius's sacrifice. "The storm is no longer something to fear," he told them, his voice steady. "It is now a part of this place, a guardian that will protect the plateau." The travellers nodded, their expressions shifting from apprehension to reverence. Keldan could see that the legend of the Lightning Warlock would live on, not as a tale of terror, but as one of redemption. The following days were filled with reflection as Keldan made his way back to the nearest village. He found solace in knowing that Darius had finally found peace, that his friend's restless quest for power had ultimately led to a sacrifice that freed not only the plateau, but also the souls of the automatons that had been bound to his will. The villagers, who had once feared the plateau and its storm, welcomed Keldan as a messenger of hope. They gathered to hear his tale, children sitting at his feet, as he described the warlock who had given everything to right his past wrongs. He spoke of the storm as a living entity, one that now acted as a protector rather than a threat. One evening, as the village gathered around a fire, Keldan looked up at the horizon. The storm was still visible, a distant flicker of lightning illuminating the clouds above the plateau. He closed his eyes, and for a moment he could feel the energy, the pulse of the storm, the life force that had become part of Darius. It wasn't sorrow that filled him, but a sense of awe. His friend was out there watching over the land, his essence carried in every bolt of lightning, every rumble of thunder. Keldan knew that while Darius had given up his physical form, his spirit had become something far greater, a force of nature, eternal and unbound. The storm rumbled gently, as if responding to Keldan's thoughts, and a single bolt of lightning shot across the sky, illuminating the night for a brief moment. The villagers gasped in awe, and Keldan smiled, a tear escaping down his cheek. "He's still with us," he whispered to himself, his heart swelling with both pride and loss. The legacy of the Lightning Warlock would endure, not in monuments or books, but in the storm that danced across the sky, a reminder that redemption could be found, even in the most unexpected ways. As the fire crackled and the villagers shared stories of hope, Keldan knew that Darius's sacrifice had not been in vain. The plateau was at peace, and the storm would forever be a beacon of resilience and transformation.